I was about to say that Washington seems to become the mecca for Western governments. Everyone seems to be on their way there, but I probably shouldn't use that metaphor on the eve of Ramadan, and particularly not with respect to the Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who is also on his way to Washington. It sort of signals a diplomatic shift between the United States and Israel. Smotrich, long ostracized by the Biden administration for his hardline views, is set to meet with the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, a meeting that underscores the dramatic change in tone and policy direction under the Trump administration. It represents a recalibration of US-Israel relations with profound implications for American policy towards Israeli settlements, worryingly, the Palestinian territories, and the broader Middle Eastern diplomacy, which is possibly a good thing. Smotrich has been one of the most controversial figures in Israeli politics, particularly due to his fervent support for the settlement expansion and his opposition to Palestinian statehood. In both issues, I think he is fundamentally and morally wrong. As the leader of the far-right religious Zionist Party, he's advocated for policies that under the Biden administration were perceived as highly problematic, and Biden's White House distanced itself from Smotrich, declining official meetings with him and imposing sanctions on extremist settlers accused of violent attacks against Palestinians. And his previous visit to Washington in 2023 was limited to engagements with Israel's US-based bond program, as no Biden administration official was willing to meet him. And this isolation was part of a broader Biden administration policy that sought to maintain diplomatic engagement with Israel while making clear its disapproval of policies that exacerbated tensions in the West Bank and in Gaza. The administration had sanctioned more than a dozen Israelis for violence against Palestinians, and had also considered sanctions against Smotrich himself, though these were never implemented. The return of Trump to the White House has brought about immediate reversal of Biden-era policies about Israel, and one of Trump's first moves was to cancel the sanctions against the Israeli settlers, effectively greenlighting increased resettlement activity and signalling a much more permissive stance on West Bank expansion. And his administration has also floated the radical idea of transforming Gaza into a luxury resort, of course, as illustrated by Trump's AI-generated Riviera vision of the Strip, complete with a gold statue of himself, a concept widely dismissed as both unrealistic and inflammatory. Smotrich's invitation by the Treasury Secretary Bessent is therefore a watershed moment. The meeting marks the first official engagement between Smotrich and a Trump administration official, indicating that Washington is no longer keeping Israel's far-right figures at arm's length. And this meeting will likely focus on economic cooperation, but the real significance lies in its political ramifications. It legitimizes Smotrich as a key player in the US-Israel relations and provides implicit endorsement for the settlement policies. Smotrich has made no secret of his ambitions. He supports the full annexation of the West Bank and the reoccupation of Gaza, positions that fly in the face of international law and global diplomatic consensus. And he's also advocated for what he calls the voluntary migration of Palestinians out of Gaza, language that critics argue amounts to a call for forced displacement. His meeting with Bessent suggests that economic measures may be used as a tool to further these aims, and Smotrich has already leveraged financial policies to weaken the Palestinian Authority, including delaying crucial banking agreements that allow Palestinian banks to function within the Israeli-controlled financial system. And a failure to renew these agreements in the future could have catastrophic consequences for the Palestinian economy. Smotrich is not the only Israeli official making the journey to Washington today. His visit follows closely on the heels of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's recent trip, where he sought to align Israel's policies with the Trump administration's new direction. Smotrich's presence in Washington may be the precursor to further visits by other far-right Israeli figures such as Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has been similarly sidelined by previous US administrations but may now find a more receptive audience. And with this visit, Trump's administration is signalling a new chapter in its approach to Israel, one that is more aligned with the Israeli far right than ever before. The implications for US foreign policy are significant. The United States may no longer voice opposition to new settlements, effectively allowing Israel to accelerate its annexation of West Bank territories. The economic strangulation of the Palestinian Authority could intensify, pushing it closer to collapse and potentially paving the way for full Israel control over the West Bank. And by emboldening hardline Israeli leaders, Washington risks further destabilizing the already volatile Israeli-Palestinian conflict and further endangering those refugees who remain in Gaza. So Smotrich's visit to Washington is not just about economic cooperation, it's a sign of a major shift. It marks the normalization of figures previously considered too extreme for official engagement, and it sets the stage for an aggressive new phase of US-Israeli relations. And whether this shift will lead to a more secure Israel or a more volatile Middle East remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: the rules of engagement have changed.